December 31st, 2023. This is a date that a lot of Nova Scotian landlords and tenants have circled in their calendars. And there's a lot of anxiety surrounding this date because this is currently when the 2% rent cap in Nova Scotia is set to be released. This was first implemented by the Liberal Party in November 2020 during the pandemic, and it was set to expire on February 1st, 2022, or whenever the state of emergency was released, whichever came first. Then in October 21, just a few months after the PCs took over, Tim Houston announced that the rent cap would be extended until December 31st, 2023. Even though throughout their election campaign, Tim Houston openly spoke out that he didn't feel that rent control was a viable option going forward for a long-term solution to our housing crisis here in Nova Scotia. I think the big question looming now is, will the rent cap actually be released on December 31st, 2023, or will it be extended again? Now, before I get into it, if you like this content and you want to see more, please click the like and subscribe to my channel. I post videos every week on YouTube about the Halifax real estate market and buyer and seller tips. Also, if you want to book a call or meeting with me to talk about real estate in Nova Scotia, you can do so anytime in the Calendly link below in my description at a time when it's convenient for you. I'm going to get into some more details here now, and I'm going to also get into my opinion on the matter, but first, I would love to hear from you. Comment below, do you think that the rent cap should stay, or do you think that it should go on December 31st, 2023? There's been a ton of talk about the rent cap and a lot of differing opinions on this topic since it was implemented and then eventually extended. And to be honest, I see it from both sides. I am a landlord myself, and I also have a lot of clients who own rental properties. But then again, I also have a lot of friends who are still currently renting in Halifax. To me, the rent cap simply kicked the can down the road. And of course, the can is the housing crisis. Now, it seems to me like the government is simply, thinking that once COVID is over and once a few years have passed by, that this problem will simply fix itself. And I'm here to tell you that is not the case here. The vacancy rate is still at an all-time low across Nova Scotia, right around 1%. And on top of that, the inventory of housing has not really grown to the extent that it needs to catch up. And to be honest, with the population growth that we're seeing here, I do not think it's possible for the housing inventory to catch up anytime soon. So this problem is simply not going to go away. According to a spokesperson for Service Nova Scotia, the government is set to phase out this temporary rent cap when the time comes, but at this time there was no comments on the logistics of doing so. In a weird sense, even though the rent cap is good for renters in a way, it has also helped to make the situation worse. So in a recent study, it showed that 66% of small landlords that were selling single-family homes that they were currently using as rentals, and they cited that the number one reason they were selling was due to the rent cap. So now, in theory, these homes are no longer in the rental market because they're single-family homes. They were sold at the heat of the market and likely bought by buyers who would be owner-occupying these properties. I believe this policy is slowly squeezing out a lot of the small landlords across the province, especially the ones that only have a property or two, and they simply cannot afford to keep the property and to support the payments on the property if the rent coming in does not cover all of the expenses. Since the rent cap was implemented, with inflation running high, basic expenses for landlords have skyrocketed. This includes insurance, heat, water, power, and not to mention snow removal, garbage, and if there's any maintenance on the property, getting those things repaired is way higher than it used to be. Some of these expenses have actually rose 30 to 50% since the rent cap was implemented. Not to mention, since the start of this year in 2022, the interest rates have doubled. So if anybody's on a variable mortgage and their payment's actually going to move because of that, they might be seeing an even further decreased cash flow monthly. Something to consider here is, should the government be able to control the property of a private Nova Scotian who purchased it with their own private money as their own private investment? And truth be told, my thought is not really. However, on the flip side, from the tenant perspective, should a tenant be facing huge rent hikes annually, and should they have some security of the roof over their head? And my thought is, yes, absolutely. The tenant should not have to worry about humongous rent hikes that are going to push them out of the unit on purpose, for example. Truthfully, I believe there's a happy medium here. I don't necessarily disagree with the thought that there should be a rent cap, but I also do not feel it should be 2%, especially in the current market conditions that we're seeing right now with inflation running around 7% annually. I do understand the hate towards, the big bad landlord, but I'm here to tell you that not all landlords are rich. Not all landlords are unfair with their rent hikes. Not all landlords are big companies. There are a lot of everyday Nova Scotians that are landlords that bought property privately with the thought to rent it out with their retirement in mind. And these are everyday people, just like me and just like you. In recent months, the government has made a lot of announcements regarding fast-track developments, but the problem is the time and the resources needed to build these. Now, it's all well and good to push permits across the desk and to try to get these things started quicker. I agree, that is a good thing. There's nothing bad that can come from that. But the problem is there's a real lack of resources in terms of builders, materials, and tradespeople to actually build these things and get them to completion in a quick time frame. The government's also trying to give grants out to large developers to, build these buildings and have some of these units as a certain percentage that would be affordable housing. And the problem is these big developers don't need the money. It's their own private investment and they have the money to build these buildings. Take a look around. What some of these people are doing is insane across Halifax. So if they don't need the money, why would they want to take it and make it affordable housing unless they really feel the need to do that to help the province? In my opinion, the only way that affordable housing is really going to be effective here in Nova Scotia, and especially HRM, is if the municipality or the province takes land that they own, they get some plans done up, and they put it out to tender. Now they get a company to build a building, and then the province themselves or the municipality manages the building themselves. But to me, it seems like they don't really want to do this, to be honest with you. Otherwise, they're just beating a dead horse and trying the same thing over and over again, which obviously has not proven to be effective up to this point. Now I want to close out with a couple interesting thoughts, kind of some food for thought for you. The same government that's acknowledging that we're in a housing crisis also has a mandate or a goal to double the population in our province in the next couple of decades, which will obviously put a lot more strain on the housing market. Now, if the rent cap is released in full on December 31st, 2023, I honestly worry for a lot of tenants because it will be scary to see the result of what happens over the next 6 to 12 months after this period as leases come up for expiry and as the anniversary dates approach as well, that landlords will be able to increase the rents to whatever they want. And keep in mind, over the last few years, they've only been able to increase it 2% per year. So if your rent's $1,000, that would only be $20. So pretty minimal in the grand scheme of things. I also believe this will be something that's difficult for the Conservatives to cut because at that time frame, we'll only be about 18 months away from the next election. And they're going to have this in mind when that date comes through. And they're also going to have in mind what the consequences could be for the housing crisis and renters out there if they cut this off sharply on December 31st, 2023. So in my head, I do think they're going to phase this out in some way, shape, or form. I have no idea what that would look like. Or maybe they'll just raise the rent cap to a higher percentage to kind of account for inflation and try to keep everybody happy. But it'll be really, really interesting to see what comes of this situation as we approach the end of 2023 next year. Truthfully, I'm hoping the government comes up with some kind of plan that will be a happy medium for everybody. But at this time, I wouldn't say I'm super, super confident in that thought process. So I'm going to end with the big question. Do you think the rent cap should stay or do you think the rent cap should go? I would love to hear what you think in the comments below. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. If you like this content and you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any more of my future content. And until next time, thanks so much for watching and have a great day.